Doctor Who's Season 12 premiere. Viewership nosedives. Well, this is an article from Bounding Into Comics. And, well, the viewership was pretty weak. The Sun reports that the first part of the two-part episode Spyfall peaked with viewership in the UK at just over 5 million viewers. They report Doctor Who's Season 11 premiere, which was also the premiere of Jodie Whittaker's Time Lord, had over 9 million viewers. Well, okay, yeah, but fell to 6 million a week, and that was the height of it. But it continued at the downward trend. And that's the problem here. When you start at 4 million, well, let's say you maintain that. Well, okay, it's not spectacular, but it's a functioning series at that rate for British viewers. But the problem is it's unlikely to continue that. Plus, this article does go into that, where a lot of people thought that, well, it was still a holiday season, and there was people home from school and work, and so you had a larger audience to watch it live, and so stands to reason that the views would be a lot more than normal, and it just wasn't. You know, they just didn't want to watch it. So that's that's not good. Now, of course, saying, wow, what a nosedive from the premiere from the last season. Well, the first female Doctor, the curiosity factor alone was going to make that one a hit. So it was quite a large catch of viewers there with 9 million. There's no way she was going to be able to maintain that, unless, of course, you really had some. Oh man, these stories are incredible. That's the problem. It wouldn't have been my call to have the Doctor at this point suddenly become a woman, but through the story and the abilities within Doctor Who and the lore there, regeneration, I don't really have a problem with the idea, and I think it could have worked, and you could have explored different avenues here that would have been ground for some really great stories. They completely ignored that. They just ran on with this very rather infantilized take on it all, very silly and goofy and disrespectful to its own property, even within the continuity of this own universe, if you will, if you just discount the previous stuff, which is a mistake, but let's just say you did. It was a lot of this, just, it's like they didn't even respect her. And she's supposed to be the new thing, and it's all very strange. But the viewership is down now. It's really bad in the States. I mean, it's just nobody even showed up for it, really. And so the first episode fared worse in the United States and BBC America. 790,000 views. Jeez. Whew, man. One of those was me, yeah. Yeah. But the downward trend overall for what is commonly referred to as New Who has been going on for quite some time. Now, a lot of people trace it back to the peak was at the 50th anniversary special, and there's a lot of truth to that. But in quality, I think was beginning to decline even before that, and the stories were just getting repetitive and silly and sort of disrespectful of itself. And people begin to notice this and to begin to branch off. Now, one of the problems was their successful formula they had achieved with David Tennant was sort of the romantic fantasy adventure, which did broaden the female audience for Doctor Who far more than it had previously. And when you break from this template, which they did with Capaldi, they were not going to have Claire and Capaldi have romantic adventures with one another because of the age difference. So even though Capaldi, in my opinion, is the absolute best of the New Who actors to portray the Doctor, maybe even one of the best overall, but unfortunately, he was just terribly underserved by the script. I mean, just it was painful to watch him have to go through, because it's no way of knowing this. It's just based on appearances. It appears it really sucked the excitement out of him. by the end, he was really ready to go. There's some story that Chibnall had tried it. I just contradicts all the accounts of why Chibnall was taking on Doctor Who. He said, well, I'll do it if I can cast a woman. And they said, oh, great. As if that was his idea. I mean, not that he didn't disagree with it, but I think this was on orders from on high, and it had to go in this direction and all that. But the story is that he was trying to talk Capaldi to stay on at least for one more season, and then this would set up the story he would want for his new Doctor. Whether that would have been Jodie or another woman, I don't know. But what have you, that's how he was going to do it. It's very similar to what Moffat ran into. He wanted Tennant to stay on for one more year because he had an idea of how to set up for his new Doctor, but Tennant was ready to go. Same thing with Smith. He wanted it. And really, I wish Smith had. Even though I like Capaldi, I think the idea that Moffat seemed to hint at was that a more darker turn would happen with Smith on his way out, and this would kind of explain the attitudes and that farm that Capaldi's Doctor appeared to have at the beginning there. They kind of changed gears and didn't quite know what to do really, and they just kind of forced it. You can sort of, I guess, assume that what the Smith Doctor went through towards the end there, where he with a couple of 100 years he fought everybody from the Christmas town, which turned out to be Trenzalore. Yeah, that was a terrible send-off for poor Matt Smith. So, but I get he was ready to go, and the idea of him doing another series, which might have gone into darker territory, and that's why you get a very, very sad and darker Doctor after that. And who knows where they could have gone with that. Would have been more interesting, and Capaldi could totally knock that out of the park, but it didn't happen that way. So had Capaldi stayed on, it's just as well he didn't, because there are no stories here. To see him suffer through the crap that they had Whittaker do here, no, they just don't have what it takes to write stories like that. And so if it were even true, which I doubt, and there are some stories that Capaldi was kind of forced out. They say, we want you gone. And that was that. So Whittaker comes in. They had this big splash. Hey, new female Doctor and all that. And if you don't like it, you're a misogynist, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, you see what that does for you. And that's it. So their only big surprise is they're going to be bringing back old villains. And so, of course, the first one's the Master. And Dalman was really campy in his initial debut. He's a little bit better in the second episode, but it's just not enough. And the whole thing was rather silly, with them jumping around times and ripping off previous Tenet episode plots and all that. So even people who want to tune in and are hoping against hope that there's going to be something, it's a sign that there's hope for this series, but there's only so much you can do. And it's just too bad. So it's not surprising the viewership is down. Of course, the defense will come in with that they will have the consolidated ratings with the people streaming it later and what have you. And certainly you can figure that in. But ultimately, even in the past, that didn't really bump it up much. They might push it to 5 million with that. But, overall, from what Doctor Who was, where it had, a rather command of a huge audience, internationally, and it was Doctor Who merchandise all over the place, and that's all gone. And so it's not the big machine it once was, and it didn't have to be that way. You can't say, well, the trends being what they are and blah blah blah. No, this was self-inflicted, and didn't have to be. As for Jodie, I'm not seeing anything that tells me she was up to the task. Probably not the best choice they could have had. But that being said, if the scripts were really strong, if these were strong stories, if these were very inspired and new, original, and going into territories that others hadn't, but you don't see any of that, and that she could handle it, and it wouldn't matter that she's not all that great of a Doctor, and if she could just abandon this David Tennant idea and make her own Doctor. but I guess that's just not going to happen either. So even if the scripts were great, would she really be a great No, I don't think so. Could she just function and it would be all right? Yeah, maybe, but we're just not going to see it, because I mean, even with, you know, the best episode of the last season was Kerblam, and that's not really saying a whole lot because it's the best compared to all the other ones, which were just really bad. It's not because of her. It's just because it felt like a Doctor Who episode. It kind of hit the points and whatnot. And it was okay, but it's not saying, oh, wow, she really nailed it there, didn't she? You know, it's just, no, I'm not really seeing that. And that's unfortunate. And I'm not saying that because I don't like her snotty remarks she's made. Getting into Brie Larson territory, Alma. She can say whatever she wants. If her performance was great, then, well, what can I do? It was great. But it's not. And that's unfortunate. There are things I thought they could have done and crafted that could have played to her strengths, as evidenced by other characters she's performed. And I think that's also a mistake that they just didn't pursue, but maybe that would have worked out better, but we'll just never know. And as it is, I don't really see it getting any better, because this is your debut episode after taking a year off for whatever reason. Like, oh, you better get your stories together, and this is how you start off, with a lazy ripoff of previous episodes. And just throwing characters around as little more than gimmicks and decoration. That's not a formula for success. So it's all very sad. It was a once great franchise, very beloved, and it appears to still be sick at the moment. So hopefully something will come along and prove me completely wrong, and we'll see a rebirth for Doctor Who. But right now, not seeing it. And the signs of where they're going with this timeless child story. Oh, jeez. Oh, man, is that a mistake? Yeah. So anyway, there you go. Another little video on Doctor Who. Thank you for watching and listening. Say, why not like and subscribe, and check out that link description below. That'll take you to my many stores that have plenty of goodies for you. Yeah, that's right, you. And you can check out my comic book, Night Night, over at indieplanet.com. It's based on my audio plays of the same character, but now you can see him in action. Oh, yeah. And you can listen to my podcast on RadioMisfits.com, the Mr Nailsin Show, where I sometimes post new adventures of Night Night. Oh, yes. And you can also watch my videos over at BitChute.com. That's the Mr Nailsin channel on BitChute.com.